I walked out of my marriage at 68 years old. 43 years together, and I left. Everyone thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But let me tell you something. Sometimes losing your mind is the only way to find yourself. My name's Carlos. I'm 74 now, and I need to tell you about the day I finally chose myself. Not in a selfish way, in a survival way. There's a difference, and it took me nearly 7 decades to figure that out. Back in my 20s, I married Linda, because that's what you did. You found a girl, you got married, you built a life. She was pretty, came from a good family, and my parents approved. I thought that was love. I had no idea what love actually was. For 43 years, I walked on eggshells in my own home. I learned which topics to avoid at breakfast, which friends to stop calling back, which hobbies to abandon without being asked. I gave up playing guitar because the noise bothered her, stopped going to ball games with my buddies because she said it was immature, even changed the way I laughed, made it quieter, less joyful, so it wouldn't annoy her when she was in one of her moods. Every dream I ever got buried so deep I forgot they existed. I became smaller and smaller, year after year, until I barely recognized a man staring back at me in the mirror. The worst part? I told myself this was normal. This was what marriage looked like. This was what commitment meant. The turning point? It wasn't dramatic. That's what surprised me most. I was sitting in my garage one Saturday morning, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I'd been out there for 2 hours, hiding. That's what I called in my head. Hiding. Linda was inside, angry about something I couldn't even remember anymore. The dishwasher? The thermostat? My breathing? After 4 decades, the reasons all blur together into one constant hum of disapproval. I looked down at my hands. 68-year-old hands, weathered and spotted. When did they get so old? When did I get so old? And then it hit me like a punch to the chest. I was waiting to die, not living, not even existing, just waiting for it all to be over so I could finally rest. That thought terrified me more than anything ever had, because it was true. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped hoping for better days. I'd accepted that this was it. This cold garage, this cold coffee, this cold marriage. This was my life, and I was just counting down the days until it ended. My father had died at 71. I thought about him in that moment. I remembered visiting him in the hospital 3 days before he passed. The room smelled like antiseptic and old flowers. He grabbed my wrist with what little strength he had left and whispered, "Bobby, don't waste it. Don't waste your time trying to be who someone else needs you to be." I nodded, thinking he was delirious from the medication. But sitting in that garage, his words came rushing back, and I finally understood what he meant. He'd seen it. My father had watched me disappear into my marriage, piece by piece, and he'd tried to warn me. Too late, but he'd tried. I started crying right there in the garage. 78 years old, and I was sobbing like a child. Not quiet tears either. Big, ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for the man I used to be. I cried for all the years I'd lost. I cried for the grandson who barely knew me because I was too afraid to visit without Linda's permission. I cried because I was so tired of pretending, tired of apologizing for breathing, tired of living a half-life and calling it enough. That's when something inside me cracked wide open. I'd spent 43 years managing someone else's emotions, walking into the house and immediately checking her face to see what kind of day it was going to be. 43 years apologizing for existing, for breathing too loud, for chewing wrong, for having opinions, for wanting things. I'd given up fishing because Linda said it was a waste of time. I'd stopped seeing my brother Tom because she didn't like his wife, called him boring, said his stories were stupid. I'd even sold my truck, that old Chevy I'd saved for 3 years to buy, because he complained about the payments. That truck was the one thing I bought for myself. Midnight blue with a bench seat and a radio that only caught AM stations. I love that truck. But Linda wanted new kitchen cabinets, so the truck had to go. I told myself it was a mature thing to do, the responsible choice. But deep down, I knew I was just afraid to say no. Every single decision in my life had been filtered through one question. Will this upset Linda? I never asked, will this make Carlos happy? I never even asked if Carlos mattered. The crazy thing? I thought I was being a good husband. I thought sacrifice meant love. I thought keeping the peace was the same as keeping a marriage. But peace isn't silence. Peace isn't walking on eggshells. Real peace is being able to breathe in your own home. I went inside that day and told her I wanted a divorce. My voice shook. My whole body shook. Linda stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Then came the explosion. The tears, the accusations, the threats. She told me I was selfish, that I was abandoning her, that everyone would know what kind of man I really was. For a moment, just a brief moment, I almost backed down. 43 years of conditioning screamed at me to apologize, to make it better, to shrink back into my corner. But then I thought about my father's hand on my wrist. I thought about those cold cups of coffee in the garage. I thought about dying without ever really living. So I held firm. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. The divorce took 8 months. Linda fought every step, trying to punish me financially, try to turn our kids against me. She told everyone I was having a midlife crisis at 70, said I had probably met someone else, which wasn't true. There was no other woman. There was just me, trying to find myself after 4 decades of being lost. Our daughter, Sarah, stopped speaking to me for a year. That nearly broke me. She called me selfish, said I was destroying the family. Every missed call from her felt like a knife to the chest. But our son, he pulled me aside one day at a coffee shop and said something I'll never forget. He looked me right in the eyes and said, "Dad, I've never seen you smile. Not really. Not in my whole life. If leaving means you might finally smile, then I support you." I started crying right there in the Starbucks. My son reached across the table and squeezed my hand. He said, "I used to think marriage meant making yourself invisible, because that's what I watched you do. But I don't want that for my kids. I don't want them to think love means disappearing." I hadn't realized how visible my unhappiness had been. I thought I'd hidden it so well. But kids see everything, don't they? They absorb it all, even when we think we're protecting them. Now, 6 years later, I'm 74. I live in a small apartment on the east side of town. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, nothing fancy. But it's mine, just mine. Nobody criticizes how I arrange the furniture or tells me the place smells like old man. I wake up when I want. I make breakfast without someone critiquing how I crack the eggs or complaining that I'm using too much butter. I go fishing every Sunday with my brother Tom. We don't catch much, mostly just sit there in his boat talking about nothing important. The weather, the game last night, what we're having for dinner. Simple stuff, but it's the best part of my week. Last month, Tom told me I looked 10 years younger than I did before the divorce. Said my whole face had changed, like I'd been holding my breath for 40 years and finally let it out. I joined a woodworking club at the community center. Made a bookshelf with my own hands. It's a little crooked, and the stain job isn't perfect, but I built it. Me. I stayed up until midnight sanding it smooth, and nobody complained about the noise or told me I was wasting my time. When I finished, I stood back and looked at it, and I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Pride. Real pride in something I created. Last month, I even went on a date. Met a woman named Carol at the grocery store. She was arguing with a cantaloupe, trying to figure out if it was ripe. I showed her the trick my grandmother taught me, and we got to talking. She asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I said yes without thinking, without checking with anyone, without worrying if it was okay. The date didn't lead anywhere romantic, but I laughed. Real laughter that came from my belly, not the polite chuckle I perfected over 4 decades. Carol and I are friends now. We meet for breakfast sometimes and talk about our kids, our lives, our mistakes. My daughter talks to me again now. She apologized last Christmas, tears streaming down her face. We were sitting in my little apartment, just the 2 of us. She brought over a plate of cookies she'd baked. Said she'd started therapy 6 months earlier and realized she'd been repeating the same patterns with her own husband. making herself small, swallowing her words, abandoning her friends to keep the peace. Watching me leave, she said, gave her permission to ask for what she needed in her marriage, to set boundaries, to remember she was a person with wants and needs, not just a wife and mother. They're doing better now, her and her husband, going to counseling together, learning how to really talk to each other instead of just managing each other's moods. She thanked me for showing her that it's never too late to choose yourself. Then she hugged me, and I felt her really hold on, not the quick obligatory hug from before. She whispered, "I'm sorry I made you feel bad for saving your own life." I cried. She cried. We ate cookies and talked until 2 in the morning about everything we'd never said to each other. Here's what I learned, and I need you to really hear this. Staying in something that's killing you slowly doesn't make you noble. It makes you a volunteer in your own disappearance. I thought leaving at 68 was too late, that I'd wasted too much time already. But every single day since has proven me wrong. You know what the best part is? I like myself now. I actually enjoy my own company. For the first time in my adult life, I'm not exhausted from trying to be someone I'm not. If you're reading this and something inside you recognized my story, if you felt that familiar ache of making yourself smaller and smaller, listen to me. You don't get a second life. This is it. These years, these days, these hours, they're all you get. And spending them in quiet misery, calling it duty or commitment or love, that's not virtue. That's tragedy. I'm not saying leave at the first sign of trouble. Marriage is work, real work, and it requires both people showing up, really showing up. But if you've been showing up alone for years, if you've lost yourself completely trying to keep someone else happy, if you're hiding in your garage with cold coffee just to catch your breath, then maybe it's time to ask yourself a hard question. How much of yourself are you willing to lose before you admit something's wrong? I left my marriage at 68. People said I was too old to start over. They were wrong. I wasn't starting over. I was finally starting. And these past 6 years, they've been the first real years of my life. At 74, I finally know what peace feels like. It's not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of yourself. And that, my friend, is worth every bit of courage it takes to claim it. Don't wait until you're 74 to find out who you are. Don't spend your whole life in that garage, waiting for permission to want something for yourself. Because nobody's going to give you that permission. You have to give it to yourself. I did, and I'm still here, still standing, still learning how to smile without apologizing for it. Best decision I ever made.